Michael, you have the floor.
And I'll put up the PowerPoint here just to kind of quickly remind everybody, including members of the public, where we are in the process. As was noted, this is the meeting to select a plan. I will go over those revised plans that were created based on the last meeting, but as a reminder, we have all of the plans available to you should you want to go back and look at any of those. In addition, if there is any plan that is close but not quite there, we can do the live line drawing process and make those final changes this evening, again, so that we can prepare a resolution for your final adoption before the legal deadline in mid-April. This has been an ongoing process, as you know. I'm sure you're very happy to have it almost be over. And unlike the last process, you'll be done for 10 years. So you'll have these lines back in place versus having to come back in a few years. As a reminder, these are the criteria under state law that govern the redistricting process. I won't go over those at length, other than just to remind you that as you're looking at the available plans, thinking about which one is your preferred one, this is a good way to kind of frame those discussions about, I like this plan because it did a good job with understandable boundaries, or I don't think this plan did as good a job with communities of interest, or whatever that may be. As a reminder, because of the demographics of the city, we did have to look at the Federal Voting Rights Act and avoid vote dilution where required, and that's something we did look at for all of the plans that are before you this evening, and you do have, as was referenced, outside counsel present if there are any questions about that. At the last meeting, we had the public plans that were submitted along with the plans that I originally created. There was general consensus around the green plan with some areas where there are still some open items in discussion, and that is what you will see in the plans I'm about to show you. Before I show those though, however, for members of the public, all of those plans are on the city website, and under state law, all of those plans will be available for 10 years. So if somebody in 2025 wants to know how these lines were put together and what the process was, that'll be available to them. With that, we'll switch over to the interactive software you've gotten to know and love. And what you see before you is, in the black lines are that green plan, and the blue lines you see there are the existing district boundaries once they were adjusted for the annex that happened a few years ago. As a reminder, the green plan made 3 changes, one between the boundary of 1 and 4. This was in part to accommodate changes to census geography. Similarly, changes in this area, again, in part driven by the fact that we had to conform to that census geography. And finally, this change here between districts 4 and 3, where district 3 was overpopulated and district 4 was underpopulated to balance the population between the 3 districts, or between the 4 districts. With that, I'll turn off the current boundaries and leave on the green plan and walk you through the 4 variations that were created. The first is the Emerald Plan. The Emerald Plan only makes 1 change, and that is a change you see in all 4 of the variants. And it was in the boundary between districts 1 and 2 to use Coyote Creek as the dividing line, which is something you see there. Again, you're seeing that in all of the plans. There are 2 other places where in the plans you see changes made. I'll walk through those. If you don't want to make either of those changes, that's the Emerald Plan. If, however, you want to make additional changes, one of the areas that was talked about was the boundaries between districts 2 and 3 in the area that was annexed subsequent to the original districting process, and whether to use Doherty Road or to use the creek as the dividing line. And that's what you're seeing there as that, that difference between the Emerald Plan and the Lime Plan. So if you want to just make that one additional change to use the creek versus Doherty, that's the Lime Plan. The Olive Plan continues to use the Doherty as the dividing line as under green, but looks at the other area that was discussed, which is whether the line could be cleaned up between districts 3 and 4 and use slightly more understandable boundaries in that area. And that's what you're seeing here, where Branch and Sherwood are now the dividing lines, and some of these areas here and here are shifted, where basically you're following along the back of Live Oak Elementary and using that as the district boundary. I will note I tried to shift this entire area into District 3, and unfortunately it started causing District 3 to be too large, which would have necessitated other changes, which also then started raising some federal Voting Rights Act issues. So if you wanted to make the change, leave Doherty as the dividing line, but clean up some of this boundary area in Windermere, then you're looking at the Olive Plan. If you wanted to make both changes, which were to use the creek and to make the changes in Windermere, then you get the Pine Plan, which is what you're looking at now. So really, assuming you want to keep with the direction from the prior meeting, which you're not bound to, using the green plan as that kind of foundation, then you're really down to kind of 3 decision points. 1, re-verifying that you want to make that change along Coyote Creek. 2, this decision about Doherty versus the creek. And 3, do you want to make these changes in Windermere? And once you make those 3 decisions, you have a plan. If there are additional changes we want to make, again, we can do that through the live process. The one other thing I will note here, and you're seeing now, again, the green plan on the screen, is that with whatever direction you give this evening, whichever plan you select, do ask that you include that, allow the opportunity to make any technical, non-substantive adjustments that move no population. The reason for that is, as was referenced by your counsel, we're going to go through and create what meets and bounds, which are a verbal description of the districts. Go down Main Street until you hit the creek, go north until you hit First Street, then take a right, that kind of a thing. And when we do that process, sometimes we can find that there's just easier ways to just slightly tweak a line that move, again, no people, but just make sure that we are using those understandable boundaries, which are one of the criteria. So just making sure that reference that particular point. With that, Mr. Mayor, again, as with the previous meetings, I will stop my share screen at the moment for any public comment, but at any point, I can bring these up and we can switch between maps based on your direction.